The Wayland Charger? No, I'm fine, thanks. Wayland Charger? I like to focus on the people. No, I'm fine, thanks. Wayland Charger? I have to show you a very funny. I like to focus on the people. No, I'm
Good
fine,
evening,
thanks.
everyone. If you can hear me,
Wayland Charger?
we'll be starting in
I have to
about
show you
2
a very funny-
minutes.
I like to focus on the people. No. Okay.
Go ahead and call the meeting to order for the Planning Commission, February 19th, Wednesday. And welcome everybody out. Nice to see such interest in what's going on, and look forward to hearing from folks tonight. We'll go ahead and get started with roll call tonight. Ms. Devereaux, would you get us started?
Yes. Sharon Wallace is excused for the evening. Ellen Talbot.
Present.
Philip Lindholm.
Present?
Mark Hare.
Present.
Lynn Larson.
Present.
Robert Estrada.
Present.
Philip Combs.
Present.
You have quorum.
Thank you. I see the minutes have made it out. Did everyone get a chance to read those?
Yes.
Were there any edits needed? If not, is there any motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Second?
We have
Second?
Mr. Herr as first and Mr. Larson as second. So all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. All right. Any updates to the agenda as outlined today?
Mr. Chair, we're just requesting that the order of the new business topics be reversed. So starting with the urban forestry assessment report and then the middle housing regulations.
Yeah, that's great. All right. For now, we get to the portion of this meeting where Planning Commission hears public comments. Please remember that this is not a discussion. Commissioners do not engage in conversation, but do not take your comments lightly, but do take your comments lightly and under advisement. Commissioners ask that your comments be courteous and respectful, be relating to the Planning Commission matters, and be limited to 3 minutes. Also, we would add that if you're here to make comments, that you may do so after this meeting and follow up by email or letter. With that, we'll go ahead and work our way through our public comment sign-up sheet.
Mr. Chair, if I could just clarify for the people here, public comment is for any general topic other than what is scheduled for a formal public hearing, if you'd like to be on the record. If you're here to testify specifically about the multifamily tax exemption residential target area map changes, that will be the public hearing rather than the public comment.
So we do have a lot of people on this list that have signed up for public comment.
Public hearing first.
What's that?
Public hearing comes first. Public hearing first.
The public comment is
public
first on
comment.
the agenda,
Yeah,
the general
public comment
comment.
first and then hearing. Yeah. So with no further ado, we'll just go in order of signatures here. Mr. James Guerrero. You want to wait for the hearing? Okay. We'll go through this list if there's anyone else who signed up for public comment, but would like to wait until hearing, we can wait for that. Taylor Lee. Related to the RTA, all right. Glenn McDermott. Okay. Thank you. David Aiken. Thank you. Mark Pfeiffer, am I saying that right?
Yes, but I'm here for the tax exemption.
Okay, so we'll wait on that. And Nancy Reed, same? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll keep going through this list here and see if we have any others. Kim Lopez. Okay. Jason Gano. Okay, thanks. Am I saying the name right? Thank you. Michael Bradsetter. Okay, for the hearing then. All right. Walter Neary. Okay. Cindy Neary. Okay. Sandy Gaines. Okay, did I get the name right on that? Okay, thank you. Cindy Gardner. All right, thank you. Christina Klaas. All right. And Dave Iverson. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone of the participants online that are here for public comment, or do we allow that?
Yes, if there's anyone online who would like to speak during the comment period versus the hearing, please raise your hand.
I see none. Let's go ahead and, if there's no one else, let's go ahead and close for public comment and move into the public hearing.
We're going to have an introduction to the hearing, Mr. Chair, by Economic Development Manager Becky Newton.
Welcome, Becky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. As was mentioned, this is a public hearing regarding the residential target areas, which allow for the multifamily tax exemption. So we have two items for consideration this evening. There are 4 potential locations for residential target areas being expanded in Lakewood. Also, there are 2 code amendments that are being presented tonight. First of all, for the code amendments, staff has proposed the following amendments to facilitate better participation from property owners and developers in the MFTE program. The first item is for a 12-year extension to be added to the Central Business District. The code amendment would read, extension for the projects receiving an initial 8-year or 12-year exemption. Any project in the Central Business District outside of the tax increment area, Lakewood Station District and Springbrook residential target areas receiving an 8 or 12-year extension may apply for the subsequent 12-year extension in exchange for continued or increased income restrictions on affordable units. The second code amendment being proposed this evening is regarding the application procedure to better clarify the process. The addition would be to say the application shall be filed after land use permitting is complete or prior to building permit issuance if no land use action is required. Conditional agreements shall be fully executed prior to issuance of the building final certificate of occupancy. Then on to the residential target area expansions for consideration, or RTA. There is a map on page 7 that is representative of the staff recommendation for expansion. So at the direction of the City Council, department staff did review existing areas for the residential target area expansion. The intention was to review which locations were best suited to incentivize economic growth and increase housing stock in the city while maintaining the character and culture of the city. Having reviewed Springbrook, Lakewood Station, Oak Brook, and the Central Business District, as well as Telecom, staff recommends the expansion of the RTA in the Central Business District. And Planning Commission reviewed residential target area expansion and the MFTE program, the 2 previous Planning Commission meetings prior to the public hearing. So this evening, we're going to focus on the staff recommendation. The recommendation is made for the following reasons: city design and planning intentions, comprehensive plan and sub-area plans, plan for new growth, expectations in population, housing units, and jobs. The CBD area is designated in the comp plan and downtown sub-area plan for a significant share of new housing. It is underutilized in terms of density and location for growth. The zoning classifications and land use designations support this. It maintains the continuity of the RTA, aligns the borders of the CBD RTA and the CBD itself, prevents island RTAs in other areas in the city as well. Also, increased housing is required to maintain the Central Business District's residential and a regional growth center as designated by Puget Sound Regional Council. The significance of the growth center is that it is necessary to qualify for transportation grants that help finance the past, present, and future capital road improvement projects throughout the city. It also follows the 2018 Environmental Impact Study and the 2024 Supplemental EIS for the 2024 Comprehensive Plan. The Downtown Sub-Area Plan update adjusted the zoning map and increased development density. We have clear design standards. It simplifies the parking standards, and there is a sub-area wide SEPA already in place. It represents the highest density within the city. It has existing capacity for infrastructure for the development. It requires frontage improvements. Also related to traffic mitigation, transportation capital improvements have been implemented for traffic flow. Green Street Loop implementation and non-motorized plans for pedestrian access are centered around the CBD. City's public transportation transfer facility is located within the Central Business District, and the city also was awarded a RAISE grant to investigate and provide improvements to multimodal transportation. Within the CBD, there are also added neighborhood protections, including design requirements that provide control over the character of any project. The code requires transition area to provide a buffer between the higher intensity uses in the downtown district and the lower intensity uses in the residential zones that surround the downtown. Restrictions regarding building height, building setbacks, parking and loading, refuge, containers, and mechanical equipment are all incorporated into this sub-area. And the neighborhood protections listed above are only applicable to the sub-areas, which are the Central Business District and the Lakewood Station District. To be clear, the MFTE does not change zoning or what is allowed, does not change design requirements or what is required for land use. And in fact, any project, in order to qualify for an MFTE, must comply with all the codes. Property owners who build new residential units or rehabilitate old units in the RTAs are eligible to apply for the property tax exemption of 8 years for market rate or 12 years if a minimum 20% of units are set aside as affordable at 80% area median income or below. That concludes my remarks this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. Ms. Spear, any updates from staff before we move into the public hearing?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. Let's see here. In the public hearing portion of the meeting, we'd like to hear from the citizens. Please remember, just like the public comments, this is not a discussion. Commissioners do not engage in conversation, but we do take your comments seriously and under advisement. Please be courteous and respectful and be limited to 3 minutes, which Ms. Spear keeps track of that carefully. So just be mindful of that. And let's go ahead and start with the folks that were in person. And we will go in the same order that I read the names. So hopefully that makes it easy for you to know when you're up. So first off, Mr. Guerrero.
Thank you. My name is James Guerrero. I live at 22 Silcox Island in Lakewood. So I'm a local architect, longtime resident. Full disclosure, I have a project that I'm working on in the MFT zone. Full disclosure, I am working on a project that's located in the MFT zone. Couple things I'd like to point out, and I am speaking in favor of the adoption of the additional MFT area. The MFTE designation doesn't change the zoning. So what I mean by that is if the current zoning would allow a multifamily project to be built, the MFTE provides some financial benefit to that construction, but it doesn't allow apartments to be built, for example, in an area that are not allowed to be built in now. So really the primary benefit is that it gives the developer an incentive to build more multifamily. Speaking about housing from I guess more of a regional perspective, we all know that there is not enough housing in Washington, in Pierce County, in Lakewood. And you can just see it by the number of people that are on the streets and the cost of what housing costs now, both for ownership and for rentals. And so my position is that any additional housing has to be a benefit up and down the chain, if you will, in terms of if you're building middle housing or middle income housing, for example, that does free up other housing to come in a little bit lower price. So we're actually helping the strain on the whole housing system. And construction is just terribly expensive now. And so the idea that you can build reasonable housing you can build at a reasonable level that people can afford is just, it's just hard to do. And so the idea that the developer gets a break to build the housing is really necessary. And my understanding is at one point, looking at the housing that was done in Tacoma, I won't quote a percentage, a very large percentage of the housing that was built there was done under the MFT program, specifically because it gives enough of an incentive that the developers can make the projects pencil. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Next, Taylor Lee.
Hello, my name is Taylor Lee. I drove here today from Bellevue, Washington. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to speak on this today, but I did send a request to Miss Becky Newton on February 10th, requesting a reevaluation of the current Lakewood RTA. Is that okay to speak on that? The Lakewood RTA?
Yes.
Okay. So in reference to the Lakewood RTA map, it appears that the boundary line appears to extend to the west of Pacific Highway and not including any parcels that belong to the east of the road. This excludes vital parcels conducive to pedestrian accessible transportation from potential housing locations. According to LMC 18C 600-610, section B4, multifamily properties at market rate that are within 0.25 miles of the Sounder Station may be permitted to allow reduced parking requirements as justified by a parking study. If we continue to consider the Lakewood Station as the anchor for the subject RTA, and we extend the boundary lines to a 0.25 mile radius from the transportation hub, this will incorporate a lot more properties that may become eligible from MFTE, therefore incentivizing development of more housing. This maintains continuity of the RTA, and there are no island RTAs. This will include additional parcels to the east of Pacific Highway Southwest that have access to numerous forms of active transportation, including non-motorist facilities. There are continuous sidewalks that exist along the west and east borders of Pacific Highway Southwest, providing direct connections to pedestrian infrastructure to Lakewood Station. There are bike lanes that are available along Pacific Highway, both north and south of the Lakewood Station. And there are marked crosswalks that are available on Pacific Highway, providing designated pedestrian phasing at the intersections. We also have the rail service and the transit service. The city of Lakewood is incentivized to optimize existing non-motorist infrastructure and future plans of building pedestrian-friendly environment by promoting more transit-oriented developments near Lakewood Station. It makes sense to take advantage of existing resources, such as pedestrian infrastructure, to facilitate the growth of more concentrated multifamily housing within the TOC zoning. I'm here today personally because my mother owns a property located at 11225 Pacific Highway. This property is located a quarter mile from the transit station. There used to be a small office building here, but unfortunately during COVID, we experienced vandalism and we made the difficult decision to demo the building. So it's now currently a vacant commercial lot. The lot still continues to experience squatters and litter everywhere. So I come down sometimes to pick up the garbage. After COVID, my mother did work on a 14-unit multifamily property plan. We did have a pre-application with the city and the comments were positive.
Mr. Chair, we're over time.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Taylor, it's run out of time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see here. Glenn McDermott.
Hello, my name is Glenn McDermott. I've been a resident in this area for 21 years, so I consider myself to have a good perspective on the situation there in terms of traffic congestion and existing properties. I'm speaking against the expansion of that part along Gravelly Lake from the high school on down to the intersection of Gravelly Lake and Nyanza Road. My subdivision has to exit onto Gravelly Lake, and at times it becomes mission impossible to pull out of there because of the traffic volume on that road. My concern is that multifamily units in that area will only increase the traffic congestion. Also, I don't believe there's adequate parking for those multifamily units. I feel that those properties would be better used to support the school facilities, like the high school is right there. We used to have a library there. My understanding is that the one that's gone in across from the Safeway is a temporary facility. And so I would think that that would be better used for another library or some other activity that supports the school district. Thank you for considering my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott. Mr. Aiken? All right, thank you very much. Mr. Pfeiffer?
Mark Pfeiffer, I live in the Lake City neighborhood. Let's see, I'm not the oldest person here in the room, but at 79, I'm getting up there. And I've been coming to Lake, I've lived here since 2009, but since 1991, 92, I've made, my mother and father-in-law lived here. And so my wife and I would be up here several times every year. And so I've watched the city. I'm not trying to be funny, but does anybody here remember Tom McCall, the governor of Oregon, who back in the 80s, there was a concerted effort to keep people out or keep Californians from moving into Oregon. And they had cartoons where he'd stand out with an umbrella and a trench coat and pouring down rain saying, "Welcome to Oregon. Please don't stay. You know, leave." And I guess, you know, this whole Growth Management Act, and it's true, there's a need for housing. But we also have a need to keep the character of our city somewhat the way it's been. And putting up these big box apartments, you can see the way they get built around here. They're ugly. And they make the downtown area of Lakewood ugly. There's nothing aesthetic about them. So please keep that in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeiffer. Ms. Reed?
Good evening. Thank you. My name's Nancy Reed. I was born and raised in Lakewood a number of years ago, and I've watched the city over time. I concur with my husband, but I also see that the area that some of this multi-housing is proposed for, there's already businesses there. So you're displacing economic viability of those businesses for more housing, and traffic is, I live on Gravelly and on Veterans Drive, and ever since they redid the road, it is absolutely bizarre to see traffic moving as fast as it does and as much traffic going back and forth. So I really think that traffic needs to be studied a whole lot more before we start trying to put housing in. There's the town center, which is going to have 400 and some odd parking spots. Where is our traffic plan and our plan for transportation? We don't have buses that are adequate here. We aren't working hard enough to make an actual moving system like they have in Europe. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. All right. Page 2, Ms. Lopez. Kim, she's still here? She didn't answer before, but maybe. All right, Mr. Gano.
Hello, esteemed members of the Lakewood Planning Commission. For the record, my name is Jason Gano, and I'm a senior consultant for One Drop. We are a collective of home builders focused on developing healthy and clean housing in Washington State and its beautiful cities. We are excited to see the Planning Commission consider the expansion of the multifamily tax exemption program and the allowance of the renewal of the existing MFTEs. This program has proven to be a positive economic driver for cities. While builders save money during the life of the project, those savings can be used to provide lower rents and reinvest in future developments, creating a cycle of continued housing growth. Although the MFT program results in temporary reduction of property tax revenue, the long-term economic impact is overwhelmingly positive. A look at the data from a similar program in Tacoma that I sent you all earlier shows that the city gave up $14,500 in property tax over 8 years per each property. And alone, those properties generated $57,300 in taxes each, not to mention the commercial taxes, road taxes, and fuel taxes you collect on top of all of those for the people living in those communities. I grew up in Lakewood, Washington, attending middle school and high school here. This community shaped me, and after going to college, I returned here. I chose to live here. I chose to work here. Rather than looking to create a future here, we need to serve those people who are looking to live here. We are not planning for progress if we're not looking at things we've already done in the past. We need to look to the future. To attract new and better places to shop and eat, we need more people. That requires more housing. To have better police, better fire, better emergency services, hospitals, that takes more residents to pay into that system. Schools, which I believe are the most important thing, takes housing to have students to go to those schools. That way we don't have to vote in a school bond and raise our property taxes every couple of decades like we've been doing. It takes kids continually attending those classes. Those schools get rebuilt and repaired and they stay beautiful. The ones that I knew and I went to and I love. This all starts with responsible housing development, and Lakewood's MFT program is a step in the right direction. Expanding and renewing this program will help ensure that Lakewood remains beautiful and a thriving city that we all know and love. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm available for questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gano. Mr. Bradstetter.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, my name is Michael Brandstetter. I'm a resident of Lakewood, and while I am on the Lakewood City Council, I should tell you that my comments tonight are not representative of the feelings of the council. I'm sort of here with an individual, and I'm taking this opportunity because you're holding this hearing and beginning work on the residential target area boundaries in the city. And I had one item that I wanted to bring to your attention that you could include in your discussions as you're trying to resolve things this year. In the Springbrook residential target area, when it was first created, manufactured housing parks were somewhat viewed as not being the highest and best use for property. However, subsequently, as we have moved forward to today, 10 years, we find that manufactured housing is being looked at as a key element in affordable housing. In Lakewood, about 6% of the city's housing stock is in manufactured housing parks. And this housing type offers options for lower income households and local, particularly for home ownership. So the Springbrook RTA has a sizable mobile manufactured housing park in it. Thus, we're looking at incentivizing developers to replace it. Now, I would tell you that in the past year, the Planning Commission recommended significant changes to the housing element of the comprehensive plan, and the City Council approved those recommendations in the housing element to be able to go and do that. And one of the elements in the comprehensive plan that we put in is we had a goal to encourage the preservation and expansion of housing options for lower income residents. And there is a policy placed in the comprehensive plan, which is HO 3.9. And the policy is to preserve and maintain existing manufactured housing parks as a supply of affordable housing and encourage long-term housing solutions that will maintain these affordable options for residents. So it seems to me that placing an existing manufactured housing park inside a residential target area, those two things are inconsistent with maintaining the park as well as doing that. And I would encourage you, as you are looking at the particularly the Springbrook RTA, and you're looking at RTA boundaries, to consider a way to resolve this inconsistency between the comprehensive plan and the RTA boundaries.
Mr. Chair,
That could
out
be
of time.
done by redrawing the RTA boundary, or it could be done by rewording the policy in the comp plan, but something should be carried.
Mr. Brandsetter, sorry, we ran out of time, but thank you very much. I appreciate the comment. All right, Mr. Neary.
Planning commissioners, nice to see you in person. Thank you for your service to the city. Same thing to staff. Neighbors, some people told me they wanted to come tonight, but for some reason they didn't get excited about talking into a microphone to these. So if you're concerned or against the expansion of the tax incentive along Gravelly Lake Drive, would you stand up or raise your hand? Thank you for your testimonial, and stay in touch because we're going to have this party again in front of the city council. Commissioners, I want to briefly offer you a different vision of the Central Business District. Now, I want to acknowledge a new business has opened in the CBD, the Take 5, which is basically the third Jiffy Lube we're welcoming downtown. I'm going to tease City Hall just a little bit, and I say, right, I think you recognize the miss here is that there are no apartments built on top of it. But that's what we're going to talk about tonight, I suppose. I need to admit to you that along Gravelly Lake Drive, we don't have big corporate chains. We have smaller businesses nestled among the trees that I suggest bring character to the community. To keep things affordable, these businesses are in older buildings, and I guess some people think that's a problem, and that's sad, I think. But here's a thought. What if instead of trying to chase small business off, we thanked entrepreneurs for bringing their small business to Lakewood? Can you imagine a Lakewood where a city, a CBD, helps small businesses and their landlords, offers to connect them to resources or marketing advice or loan programs or whatever they need to succeed? Maybe we should thank people for bringing scones and baked goods to the neighborhood. Maybe we should thank the people who offer us coffee and hot yoga, not me, the hot yoga for others, hairstyling, dental services, build kitchen range hoods. Maybe we should encourage people who offer support and supplies for hobbies like quilting, or the person who repairs electronic devices or offer tax services. You get the idea. Now, I realize these entrepreneurs are not corporate chains. I realize these people are not housing developers who can convince City Hall to include them in the incentive boundary and somehow thus gerrymander our perfectly fine neighborhood into the tax incentive area. But small business owners may not have influence like that, but small business owners are people too. They offer things essential or fun or both. Their small businesses bring character to our community. What I would propose to you is that Lakewood life should not be just about getting a snazzy corporate oil change or building a box apartment. Life should have some character in it, and I'd encourage you to include that in your vision for Lakewood and act accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neary. I see Ms. Neary making her way already, so welcome.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to all of you for your public service. Working on the Planning Commission is probably a thankless job. And I know that you have a vision for Lakewood. The reason that I'm here tonight is because I don't agree with all of your vision and I want my voice to be heard. One of the concerns that I have that my husband didn't bring up is that I recently learned that the green space requirement for each unit in the large apartment complex that is scheduled to go into the mall is 100 square feet per unit, which I think is insubstantial. And I would argue that it needs to be expanded significantly, maybe to 200 square feet. 100 square feet is roughly the size of my bathroom if you took out the tub and the closet. It's not even enough to have a decent patio to grow some plants in pots. And those kinds of apartments that are set in parking lots are undesirable and they're ugly and they attract people who are displaced and low income, which is, I want those people to have a decent place to live, not just a place to live. If you look at some of the apartment buildings that have already been built and approved in Lakewood, you'll see that very little green space surrounds them. I'm speaking specifically of apartment building for lower income seniors on 112th. And there's another apartment complex on the street that's a little bit behind where the Andresen Shoe Store Mall is, that have very little green space. And I foresee that in 20 years, when those buildings are a little bit more rundown and shabby, that they're not going to be desirable places to live. I love Lakewood, and I've lived here for almost 30 years. And I live in a neighborhood that's tree lined and walkable and near downtown. I live on School Street. And I love it. I love being able to walk with my husband in the evenings when the weather's decent, and just feel nature around me. And I don't want Lakewood to lose that. I think we really need to look at the green space around our apartment buildings and what's required, and also parking, because I think parking is a big concern. Not just because I don't want to see cars parked on the sides of Gravelly Lake Road and other small roads. I recently took a trip to Bothell, and where they have a lot of mixed use with apartment buildings nestled near residences and businesses. And it's awful. I wouldn't want to live there.
Ms. Neary, we just hit the 3-minute mark, but
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Ms. Gaines?
Hello, and welcome, everybody. My name is Sandy Gaines. I'm not used to speaking in public. I am president of a small condo community that sits between Lake Grove and 100th Street there, over there by Park Edge Elementary. And it used to be apartments. They turned them into condos. We keep it up very nice. There's 20 units. And I guess my concern is, you know, are they going to do anything to that? Do we have any fears of losing our places we live at? Because there's certainly no room there to build anything. We got 20 parking spots, 20 units. We got 2 small common areas of grass, and we got like maybe 4 visitor spot. And like I said, basically we're behind the new oil change place that they built off of Gravelly Lake. I guess I just have concerns of what they might do there or what they could do. So, and we have a number of owners here that is representing the women, because it's a nice little community and we would like to keep it that way. Thank you.
Ms. Gardner?
Good evening. I would like to suggest that the commission postpone any decision tonight and not suggest to the city council that they go ahead with the RTA or the tax incentive until after the building is at the Alliance complete. And once it's complete, you can then decide if the impact on the schools and the traffic has been major or not. And after you have that information, I think you'll make a better decision regarding Lakewood and the future of what's happening to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Claus?
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for this ability to speak to you guys. My name is Christina Kloss. I've lived in Lakewood my whole life, or adjacent to Lakewood my whole life, but I'm currently adjacent to the area on Gravelly Lake Drive that we're discussing tonight. I'm also a small business owner and I work in the schools for which this neighborhood feeds. Okay. Those who are diligent or faithful in little things will prove they can be diligent and faithful in the bigger things. Based on what the city of Lakewood has shown us so far, I know we are diligent in oil change locations, banks, car washes, and big box apartments. So considering giving more territory for high density development does not mean that the city will all of a sudden begin building apartments or mixed use buildings that, quote, fit within the character and culture of our city. I have had many conversations, both public and private, with city representatives about how development and growth should happen in our city. Excuse me. I do not disagree that we need development in our downtown area. I think the town center is a majorly failed project, and to see it revitalized would certainly change the whole look of Lakewood. But because there are barriers to the city doing that, the city is trying to develop the area surrounding the town center because that's our option. However, extending the RTA down Gravelly Lake Drive is not the answer. Most of the space in that space for development is, one, occupied by current, active, thriving businesses, and two, located in transitional zones close to residential areas. If I've done my homework correctly, extending the RTA makes it possible for developers to come in and build high-density housing with multifamily tax exemption. However, in this transitional space, most buildings should be no higher than 45 feet according to Lakewood's municipal code. Also, in order to qualify for the MFTE, new apartment complexes need to have more than 15 units. That means in these small spaces that are transitional along Gravelly Lake Drive, the only way to build new apartments according to code and permitting is to build dense box style apartments so that they fit. This leaves very little room for green space, very little room for parking, and zero room for local businesses. We have to do better. We have to do better as a city. We do not need to be Tacoma. We don't need to be UP or Reston or Puyallup. We need to be Lakewood. We need to take a look at where we have been, honor the history of the city as we move forward. And if we can't develop anything other than what we have currently been showing, if we can't develop anything other than big box apartments, then we need to say no, no more until we make it right where we are.
Thank you. Mr. Iverson?
Thank you. I just want to, we're probably in the minority here, but I just want to say, reiterate what I think Becky and a few other people said. It doesn't change the zoning. It gives incentives to builders or developers in these difficult times. I think James or someone else said it correctly that, you know, it helps along the chain of housing to develop middle income, middle housing. It helps bring people up. And so I just think, thank you guys for being here. I'm really happy to see the turnout and appreciate all the feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's it for those who have signed up. Is there anyone who signed up online?
Mr. Chair, it looks like there's 3 hands up at the moment. If you'd like to just have them go one at a time, is that all right?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start. We'll go in alphabetical order so there's no confusion here. I don't see your whole, oh, you can't. Ms. Buchanan?
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Adria Buchanan, and I am a resident of University Place. I also run the Fair Housing Center of Washington, a nonprofit that fights unlawful discrimination and works to promote inclusive communities in 23 counties in Washington, including Pierce County. I am in support of the MFTE program for the city of Lakewood. The MFTE program has many benefits for developers and the community, but ones worth highlighting are increased project feasibility, helping to make projects financially viable in high cost or underdeveloped areas. It encourages density and mixed income housing. It encourages urban growth and revitalization, promoting development in targeted areas, increasing housing supply without direct public subsidy. It also supports workforce housing, providing housing for essential workers, including teachers, healthcare, service industry workers in otherwise high-cost areas. And it increases housing supply, helping to meet the demand and potentially stabilize rents over time. In an increasingly complex housing environment where financing on the developer side and economic stability on the renter side is uncertain, MFTEs help mitigate the risk of a new project and ensure housing is sited in areas of opportunity for those who need close proximity to jobs and other essential services. Given the benefits of MFTEs, this program also helps facilitate the City of Lakewood's obligation to affirmatively further fair housing under HUD by creating a more inclusive housing environment that expands housing choice and is mindful of developing and siting projects in ways that are equitable. I hope Lakewood and the Planning Commission will continue to affirmatively further fair housing in this way so that residents all over can have more choice in where they live. If residents of Lakewood have other ideas for how to encourage equitable development that offers greater housing choice, it would be nice to hear those ideas rather than simply reasons for why it won't work. Complaining does not get us closer to the goal of creating thriving communities. Thank you for your work. Please continue the MFTE program.
Thank you, Ms. Buchanan. Christina Minetti, I see two lines for you here. Are you able to jump on one of those?
Ms. Minetti and the Gary Oak Coalition has been unmuted.
Hello. Yes, I had two because I wasn't sure whether I'd be allowed to make two comments, one for the nonprofit and one for myself using one Zoom line. So, is that okay?
I don't know. I haven't come across that.
If
Do
I
you
could,
have-
Mr. Chair, I would just suggest, Ms. Minetti, that you be very clear when you're making comments on behalf of the coalition versus
Right.
on behalf of yourself.
Okay, so I will start now with comments on behalf of the Gary Oak Coalition. I'm here on behalf of the Gary Oak Coalition, which is an environmental nonprofit based in Lakewood, to ask you to reject the proposed multifamily tax exemption and changes to the residential target area boundary. Our main concerns are environmental. The tax incentives will encourage the further destruction of our environment on these underutilized, in quotation marks, parcels, which now have only small or medium structures and often have trees. The stretch along Gravel Lake Drive has many Gary Oaks that, according to WDFW, should be preserved. All Gary Oaks west of the Cascades, according to WDFW, should be preserved. We are concerned that the developers will be allowed to cut down Gary Oaks because they are in the way of their plans, or that they will be allowed to build in such a way, such as on Gravel Lake Drive by Slocum Boulevard, that the Gary Oaks, hundreds of years old, are spared, but are abused in such a way that they will suffer for decades and quite possibly die as a result, long after everybody forgets what used to be there. Please incentivize instead the protection and preservation of the trees in our city and also the environment. The development of at the end of Gravel Lake Drive, where Key Antiques used to stand, is particularly troubling because there are plans to put dozens of apartments there just adjacent to the salmon-bearing Clover Creek and just a few hundred feet from Lake Steilacoom, which according to the city is also highest priority fish habitats. That's the city's word. It is clearly foreseeable that the huge number of added vehicles and related acutely toxic 6-PPD quinone and other toxins will adversely affect the health of that creek and lake, as well as that of our sole source aquifer. The city and its hearing examiner did not seem to be concerned in the least about the question of the 500 plus added cars to the area just above the headwaters of the downtown's other salmon-bearing creek, Ponce de Leon. The city accepted unquestioningly, it seems, the developers' assurances that a sand filtration system will solve the problem of 6-PPD quinone. It won't. Sand doesn't work, which you can confirm with a quick search. In the draft ordinance, we read that, quote, "The state legislature further found that in order to meet the goal of 1 million new homes statewide by 2044 and enhance quality of life and environmental protection, innovative housing policies will need to be adopted," end quote. We asked that the city of Lakewood make protection of its environment and truly innovative housing policies their highest priorities and not the quick meeting of affordable housing goals. There's no time to waste. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
now I have a comment on my own behalf.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Minetti.
Christina Minetti, Lakewood, I ask you to reject the proposed multifamily tax exemption and changes to the residential target area boundary. I've lived in Lakewood since 1972, and I also submit to the comments of Ms. Kloss, Mr. Neary, Mr. Pfeiffer, who were before me. From 1977 until 2013, I lived in the neighborhood that will be perhaps the most dramatically affected, and my parents still live there on Ponce de Leon Creek. I live now not far and still visit my old neighborhood almost daily. This area is simply not suitable for the kind of development these proposals would encourage. First, I'd like to say that I know that the city council and staff keep pleading that the pressure to build more housing comes from outside the city, and I know we need more housing. They say it's beyond their control, that nothing can be done, that it's a mandate, but there are things that can be done, and cities and citizens around the country are resisting these mandates through various means. If the city had the will, they would pursue these possibilities and protect our city and its environment from further destruction. Second, rather than have incentives to destroy areas that are quote unquote underutilized to build higher density housing, which should be saved for their trees and their positive impact on livability, the higher density housing needs to be directed towards areas that need to be redeveloped, as the other woman was talking about about Pacific. Those that have already been trashed, essentially. There are many areas along main arterials that have been crying out to be redeveloped. Apartments also need to be closer to I-5, which, we can't have all these cars clogging the small roads that go from the downtown. If there are any incentives, that's where they need to be. But why should there be incentives? Is this not just a good way to give a nice tax break to some friends and stay on construction industry's good side? Tax incentives take money away from the city coffers and put more tax pressure on the citizens. The fellow who said that, it makes up, there are also studies that show it doesn't make up. The tax incentives, the city never gets the money back from what they lose. Why should you reduce tax income from allowing developers to build in Lakewood anyway? If they build, they should pay. They're making money at the expense of our quality of life. We maybe won't attract developers who will build on a shoestring and build these ugly, horrible, cheaply built things that are going to fall apart. But maybe we can have some attractive, solidly built apartments like other places. Apartments don't have to be cheap and ugly. Lakewood used to be pretty nice, but with every new apartment building, it is simply getting uglier and uglier. I can't think of one apartment building that's been built in the last 15 years that can even be remotely regarded as contributing positively to our city's landscape. Apartments don't have to be like this. Europe is full of apartments and they're not like this. We don't have to ruin Lakewood like this. Developers have been allowed to run amok in Lakewood, building whatever cheap, ugly stuff they want, cutting down trees in the process, even Gary Oaks, and ruining what nice aspects of this city that there were. I ask that you reject these proposals and that you rethink things so that we can have a nice Lakewood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Minetti. Next up, we have Stephanie Shin. Sorry, that's out of order there for going alphabetically, but she was next on the list there, so.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. My husband, Tommy Shin, and I bought a unit at the Whitman. Sandy Gaines spoke earlier. And we bought a unit there, and our intentions were to rent it below market, to give the hardworking folks that live in our community a hand up. And we feel passionate about that. And I guess my suggestion would be there are plenty of units to rent if people are willing to rent below market. Give people a break. I mean, that's what we want. We want people that work in our community to be able to afford to live in our community. And that's what makes it a wonderful place to live.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Shin. And I think we have one more, Mr. Dunlap. the floor is yours if you can hear us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is James Dunlop. I am a resident of Lakewood, and I would, oppose this this granting of this tax incentive, and I would oppose the development in around Gravelly Lake. It seems to me that if you look at who is supporting this, basically it's developers. In many cases, it is developers. Clearly, there's money involved, but in terms of residents in Lakewood don't support this expansion and this development of apartments. And you have to ask, what you're doing. It seems to me that Lakewood has been in a period of sort of slow decline and sort of destruction, which has been quite sort of accelerated over the last year. For example, the destruction of the library, and a couple of years ago we had the Springbrook and Woodbrook being wrecked. And so this is just part of the same process. And I think that in a way yours is kind of like the apocryphal comment, I don't think it was ever said, but by some United States officer during the Vietnam War, that we had to destroy the village to save it. And it's kind of what you're doing with Lakewood. I mean, and you have to ask, who is actually wanting this development. And as Christina Monetti has just said, there seems to be a sense of sort of weakness by the city, just doing what the developers want. There is a scope for imagination. Apparently, there is going to be an increased demand for housing over the next few years, though maybe not. You're making assumptions about the current economic condition. There hasn't been a recession for some time. There hasn't been a serious recession for a very long time. When is the business cycle going to end? And it might be just as you're putting up the houses and just as people are moving into it, the economy could crash. And of course, with AI and other things going on and automation, there simply may not be the jobs around to support housing and the price of housing and so forth. So the basic assumption of wanting all this cheap housing may be illusory. And in a few years' time, Lakewood may end up like Detroit, having a lot of housing, but no one wants to live in.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlap. I believe we've heard from everyone at this point who signed up, and we appreciate everyone's comments. I know even among the folks who spoke tonight, there was disagreement, and I appreciate everyone doing it cordially, and that's really what community is about. So when we get together and have these conversations, we can have them in a good manner. So thank you for that. Let's go ahead and move on to, is there anything else you'd like to touch on related to that?
I would just suggest perhaps that the commission consider keeping this hearing open until the beginning of the next meeting for additional written comment, should anyone wish to submit that. So if you wouldn't mind announcing whether you're willing to
It's
do
a
that. or
great
not.
idea. Anyone willing to?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. So we'll go ahead and keep comment open by writing until next meeting. All right. Ms. Spear, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And so what we're going to do is transition now to a couple of guest presenters, both of whom will be remote. We're going to begin with a discussion of the results of the 2024 tree assessment report that was conducted on behalf of the city by Facet. And so I'm going to just very quickly introduce this topic and then turn it over to them. If you will recall, part of what happened over the last few years with our comprehensive plan was there were some additions to it. First and foremost, the 2021 energy and climate change chapter was added to our plan. And then following that, there were a couple of implementation and work plans adopted. Last year, when our comprehensive plan was updated in the big 10-year process, there were some additional policies added, as well as a new natural environment element. And so explicitly within our comprehensive plan right now, there is a policy to improve the urban tree canopy. There's another that is maintaining an urban forestry program to preserve significant trees, promote tree health, and increase tree coverage citywide. And then there is a specific goal as well of achieving a 40% citywide tree canopy cover by the year 2050. There has also, since then, been some requirements adopted by the state legislature in changing the Growth Management Act, which now are wanting, or requiring, I should say, the city to take additional action regarding urban heat resilience, the planting plans for municipal projects to incorporate native and climate resilient plants, to go ahead and have an urban forestry management plan. And so all of those things bring us to where we did last year, which was again to commission this tree inventory in order for us to understand our starting point and then work forward from there. Once you hear this tonight, just know that this will be coming back to you as part of a number of other topics this year about what are the next steps now that we do have this data out of the inventory. But just a heads up as well, that we do have some identified dollars for the near future in terms of implementation. There are ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act dollars. There is a city tree fund, which is filled by tree permit fees over time. And those two together are at about $665,000. And then there is also anticipated grant funding coming from the state for an additional $185,000. So between now and mid-2029, we have roughly $850,000 identified. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the presenters from Facet and also allow them to present themselves. So I'm going to promote them to a panelist. Are you there, Facet?
We are. This is Kim Frappier. Can you hear me?
You can, and I'm about to let you start your video. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's not letting me share the video quite yet. Okay.
Give that a try again.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I will go ahead and share my screen and we will start the presentation. Tiffany, has Sam Payne also been elevated?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Presenter?
Nope, I will do that right now.
Okay, great. We are co-presenting this evening, so I need him on here too.
Hello, I think I'm in now.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect. I will go ahead and share the presentation. See the screen.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so my name is Kim Frappier and I'm a senior urban forester and environmental planner with Facet. And I'm joined tonight by Sam Payne, who's an ecologist and certified arborist. And we are two of the Facet team members that have been working on the urban forest assessment for Lakewood during the past year. And as Tiffany noted, the purpose of this project is really to provide the city with the needed data to support development of your urban forest management plan and program, and to inform future funding, policies, and partnerships in your efforts to increase your citywide canopy cover and grow a sustainable and resilient urban forest. Oh, here we go. So given the scope of the study and because a field inventory of every tree in the city was not logistically nor financially feasible, the project team utilized 3 methods to assess trees at various scales and across both public and private land ownership. And this included GIS tools used to assess canopy cover, potential planting areas, and creating a canopy height model, as well as on-the-ground field inventory of city right-of-way trees and city-owned and managed parks, select public institutional grounds such as public school sites, as well as the JBLM North Clear Zone. And lastly, on the ground assessment of forested natural areas using a rapid assessment method. So to dive into the GIS components of the study, I'm going to hand the presentation off to Sam to get us started.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started talking about the methods and the results of the urban tree canopy portion of this assessment. As a little context, we were tasked with evaluating tree canopy within the various zoning districts and census block groups in Lakewood. And although some previous studies exist, such as the one from Planet Geo, we had to run a new urban tree canopy analysis since that proprietary spatial data wasn't available to review and refine for these metrics. So our tree canopy assessment is based on the latest publicly available LiDAR data set, which has a 2020 flight date. And we found that the city as a whole has an overall tree canopy cover of 24.4%. This is roughly comparable with other cities in Pierce County, which average 28% urban tree canopy cover. And this data is available now to Lakewood in a geodatabase format, so it can be spatially reviewed, as well as in the report and various supplemental tables. In a review of the census block portion of that urban tree canopy cover, we found that there are 42 of the 53 census tract blocks that were reviewed have canopy cover less than 35%, which was basically just chosen as a threshold amount for one that is in need of additional evaluation and has opportunity for, or is identified as opportunity for more tree planting. And then the other thing that we found in review of canopy cover in the census block groups is that there is a positive correlation with median household income and canopy cover, a trend that is fairly common across the United States, but highlights a bit of an inequity where the higher earning areas tend to have more canopy cover and benefit more from trees and green spaces than lower income areas. This figure shows canopy cover as sort of a heat map symbology across the different zones in Lakewood, with the darker colors having the highest canopy cover greater than 35%, to the lighter blue-green color and beiges having the lowest canopy cover. We'll go really briefly through this just because of the limited time for the presentation, but I'll highlight a few highlights for this, that the residential zones, which in aggregate account for 59% of the entire city's tree canopy. We highlight that most of the canopy is in these residential zones, in that between the zones, they range from about 23 to 48% canopy cover. Another zone that has a high level of canopy cover is the open space and recreational zones, which account for 17% of the total urban canopy cover. And then one zone that has a particularly low amount of cover is the commercial industrial zone, which has 11.3%. Moving on to the plantable area part of the analysis. This was done in two spatial scales. One we call the contextual level. The other is the site level, which we'll go into next. The objective of the contextual level was just a really high level review of plantable area in the city as a whole. It's useful for several reasons, one of which is that when we evaluate what a realistic goal is for city canopy cover, it could be a bit of a gut check to see if that's attainable. It also can be useful to evaluate which portions of the city have the most opportunity for tree planting as well. So some highlights for this are that the city has about 3,400 acres of plantable area. This represents about 31.4% of the entire city. And I would just add some caveats to this that this type of evaluation is limited based on the accuracy of the underlying data that's inputted into the GIS model. And additionally, that it does include lands that are and may be constrained by other incompatible land uses and infrastructure. For example, like a baseball field is an area that is technically plantable for trees, but nobody would ever do that. It wouldn't meet the management objectives. So this number likely overestimates the amount of plantable area in a city, but is still useful for planning purposes.
Can I ask a really quick question, Sam?
Yeah.
Sure, if that's all right. When you say plantable areas based on the data, is it like the type of soil? Is it rain amounts? What constitutes plantable?
Yeah, so we define plantable space as basically an area with a suitable growing substrate. Yeah, areas with soils, they could be vegetated, but if they have to exclude trees, if there's a tree currently there with the canopy, obviously that doesn't count because there's already cover. It excludes impervious surfaces, any areas with development. So it does not consider areas that could be restored to be plantable in the future. Yep. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Thank you.
And one last note for this topic before I move on is that about half of all the plantable areas would need to be planted to achieve the city's 40% goal. There's also a similar trend of plantable area against income as there is with urban tree canopy cover, with the higher income areas having more plantable area. This might be because wealthy areas tend to have larger lots, or they tend to have areas that are served by more green spaces and parks, although we did not evaluate the causal relationship as a part of the study. For the site level analysis, the objective of this was to assess plantable spaces specifically in city managed areas such as right-of-ways and public parks. Really more of an operational tool to highlight and review areas that could be an opportunity for planting for city operations. Of course, because this is GIS based, these need to be field verified and confirm that they are actually a good fit. And this picture here on the right just depicts graphically how the analysis was conducted. We use a combination of existing canopy cover data and city planimetric data to find areas that are incompatible, and then other areas that are plantable.
Okay, so moving on to the tree inventory component of the project. The individual tree inventory data was collected by our ISA certified field arborists on nearly 12,000 public trees in the city. Data was collected on the size, species, condition, as well as maintenance needs of each tree. And the city included the study area included city-owned right-of-way, developed parks, and select public institutional grounds, as well as the JBLM North Clear Zone. So this is a data set that the city can continue to build on as funding capacity allows, and you can actively integrate the geodatabase that will be providing the city into your future tree maintenance and asset management practices, which we'll speak to further at the end of the presentation. And so the figure that you see here, these are actual individual data points of the trees that were collected last summer.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
I'm seeing no trees in Stillicum Park or any of the other parks. Is there a reason?
So yeah, we're about to get to that. There were some sites that were collected using a different methodology. And so we specifically used the tree inventory tree by tree method in developed parks, where there were primarily ornamentally landscaped trees. And then trees that had large forest stands and natural areas were developed using the Forest Landscape Assessment tool, which I will speak to in just a moment.
And one follow-up question on this. I noticed the bodies of water like Wahop Lake and Lake Louise and a couple of the other smaller lakes are showing as plantable or measured areas. Is there a reason they were included instead of Lake Steilacoom and Gravelly Lake and so on?
I'm sorry, you want me to go back to the plantable space? Would you like me to go ahead and go through the rest of the tree inventory presentation and then we can circle back to the plantable space question?
Sure, go ahead.
I just thought that might be helpful for me just to finish up this component and then we can circle back.
Go ahead, Kim.
Does that sound good? Or we could go back to plantable
No,
space now.
please proceed. We'll cover those at the end.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. I'm also happy to take questions throughout the presentation as well. I just want to make sure that.
No, we'll keep going. We'll pepper you at the end.
Okay, all right. I'll make a note, make sure that we circle back on that. Okay, so I just wanted to go ahead and provide the findings, or at least a snapshot of the findings from the tree inventory. All of the details are found in Chapter 4 of the final report. But for now, I'm just going to highlight a couple of key items. So in terms of the species profile of the trees that we inventoried, we documented 161 different species that were present, the two most abundant being Douglas fir at about 30%, and the second were oak species at 14%. 11% of those oak species were your Oregon white oak, which is, I know, a critical species for the city for conservation. And then the remaining 3% of the oaks were ornamental varieties. 54% of all public trees inventoried were characterized by 5 primary species. As I mentioned, the Doug fir, Oregon oak, with Norway maple, cherry plum, and red maple making up the remainder of that. Another important data attribute collected looked at tree condition, which was based on the arboriculture industry standard from the Council of Tree and Landscape Appraisers. And as shown in this figure, about 73% of the trees surveyed in the inventory were in good condition. This represents a positive sign for the overall health and sustainability of the publicly managed trees. However, we did see 21% were in fair condition, which is a rating given if we observe reduced vigor and or defoliation is observed due to pests or diseases, as well as those displaying symptoms of drought. Another key thing that we documented during the inventory were tree maintenance needs, specifically for the publicly managed trees. And we documented maintenance needs on approximately 21% of the inventory. And all maintenance recommendations are detailed in the report, as well as will be included in that GIS database that I mentioned. But there were 7 primary maintenance tasks that we documented during the inventory, with the top 3 including pruning the canopy for clearance over sidewalks and roads, removing deadwood, and also removal of trees that were listed as either dead or in critical condition. Okay, so now I can either, I can continue with the Forest Landscape Assessment tool, or we can circle back. What would you prefer I do at this point?
Finish.
Go ahead and finish up. Okay.
You okay waiting to finish? All right, let's go ahead and let you finish, and then we'll ask any questions at the end.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, so the third assessment methodology that we utilized was called the Forest Landscape Assessment tool. This is a rapid ecological assessment method that was developed to assess forest and natural area habitat health and to prioritize restoration needs. This was developed in partnership with the Green Cities Research Alliance and the USDA Forest Service. In this approach, habitat metrics are collected to describe the composition or value of the forest stand or natural area. And all of these are measured in acres. And the second variable is a measurement of the level of invasive species cover or the threat. And so the stand, the forest stand or the natural area, is then assigned a forest health rating using this matrix that's called a triage matrix. And it's a scale between 1 and 9. And so as this figure demonstrates, on the left side, you have the value for a low, medium, or high value habitat composition or tree canopy composition. And along the bottom, you see the threat levels of low, medium, and high invasive species threat. And so the triage categories provide a forest health snapshot that can be used by managers to understand at a high level, site conditions, and then prioritize areas for further study, for maintenance, for restoration. And the FLAT methodology was used on 4 large acreage sites, including Fort Steilacoom Park, Wards Lake Park, Seeley Lake Park, and the South Puget Sound Wildlife Area. And the reason that this methodology was proposed and used is because doing an individual tree by tree inventory of these sites was neither, again, kind of logistically or financially feasible. And really, this is a more effective way to be able to assess these larger sites that have large forest stands. So this is actually an example of one of what we call our triage maps of one of the sites. This is Fort Steilacoom Park. And so you can see here that the site was divided into habitat management units, or what we call HMUs, that are based on, that were originally divided out based on GIS land cover and a GIS-based forest stand analysis. And then our ecologists and arborists take this information on the ground and collect data on the specific forest metrics that are shown here. And these include things like overstory species size, stalking, that is similar to a measurement that we use in traditional forestry, understory species and cover, the presence of regeneration trees, as well as invasive species. And so each of the colors that you see here represents one of these management units that's been assigned a specific triage value. And so each of the sites has their own triage map and information in the report.
Mr. Chair, I think I can answer your question very quickly. When you were looking at that earlier map and you saw some water bodies in white and others were green, I think the green was just overlaying the park. And so you have some parks that have lakes inside them, and they were just part of the park coverage, and then the white water bodies are outside of a park. I think that answers.
I'm thinking about the coverage total. So when we're measuring to 24, are we counting those bodies of water inside that or not? And it looked to me like we were counting it as tree area or potential tree area.
Oh, so you mean the canopy cover
That's
percentage?
correct.
Okay, yeah. So we actually excluded the water bodies in our analysis. So when we so that 24.4% does not include water bodies as plantable.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't tell from the map. It looked different, so that's helpful.
Yeah.
We have one more question, and then we'll go on and save the rest till then.
Okay.
While we're on that point, help me, Laura. While we're on that point, did we take out, in order to get to the 24% number, the basis for it, did we remove the non-tree plantable areas from the overall land of the city? The Lakewood Industrial Park with all its buildings, all the rooftops in the city of the houses, Interstate 5, and the extension of Joint Base Lewis McChord's runway. Do we subtract those out in order to get to the 24% as a basis of the actual tree plantable land in the city?
Yeah, so Sam, do you want to answer that or do you want me to?
I could answer that one. Yeah, so if we're talking about the 24.4% number, that includes everything in city limits except for waters. So it would include all of those properties. That's really a standard way that citywide urban canopy covers are measured.
Yeah, it's
So
based on the total land area of the entire city.
yes, total land area. That's right.
Would it be more accurate? Would it be more accurate to use actual data instead of general data in order to get to the numbers that we're working from?
This is using geospatial analysis and LiDAR analysis for canopy cover at this geographic scale is a really common methodology and considered, I guess, what you would call real data for assessment. It's because it's really logistically and financially, it would be extremely expensive to do a tree by tree inventory on all private land, especially if private landowners do not want you to do an individual field-based canopy assessment. And so this is really the most robust and I guess I would say logistically and financially feasible approach to scale tree canopy assessment.
I don't understand why, well, the answer to my question then is no. Is that correct?
If I understood correctly, and I don't want to belabor this because I want to let you get to the end and then we can keep going. But the way I heard it, Lynn, was that it's when you're looking at this much data, you have to use a broad stroke and kind of go that way. Otherwise, to define every single road and street, which I get, you can't plant anything on I-5 or any roads or, you know, on tops of roofs. But it gives you a kind of a general acceptable analysis. Am I hearing you right, Sam?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I heard that. I just had a question. I just questioned the logic and the validity.
Well, and I think that there are also two different different measurements that we're talking about. One is the urban tree canopy cover. That's across the entire, city, acreage. And then the plantable space, we did exclude things like I-5 and, an impervious surface. So the plantable area is a separate method and metric than what tells us what the urban tree canopy is across the whole city.
Yeah. Thanks, Ms. Fassett. That makes sense. And I think we all recognize we have a very limited amount of space in which we are able to try and meet this goal.
Yeah.
And we can save that for later. But I'll let you keep going.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on down back here. So I was just wrapping up the flat findings, and basically I'll just go ahead and maybe move on here. I think I've covered flat pretty thoroughly for the most part. Just that what you see in this figure is simply the triage results across all 4 of the sites that we did. And so this basically shows us that about 28% of the inventoried natural areas that we assessed have an overstory composition that was well suited to their site and ecoregion. That's shown in the top 3 categories in green along the top. These include natural areas with an abundance of conifers, Pacific madrone, Oregon white oak and wetlands. The medium scoring habitat management units are in categories 5 and 6, and they're represented through this through the orange colors in the middle. And these generally are represented by areas with a high proportion of deciduous or non-native canopy species that have a moderate to high cover of invasive species. And lastly, the categories along the bottom, categories 7 through 9, represent areas with a low value composition. About 34% of the acres fell into this category, and this includes areas that had no conifers, madrones, native oaks, or non-forested natural areas that were capable of supporting forests. And these areas also included open fields that could be potentially restored to forested condition. So Sam, I will go ahead and let you finish up with the canopy height model information.
Okay. Yeah, so next I'll talk about the canopy height model. This is a method that was provided to evaluate trees on sites where field assessments were not feasible because of either time and budget constraints, or also primarily because many of them were inaccessible on private properties. Below is a list of some of the, well, actually all of the evaluated large acreage sites, which were thought to have a relatively important contribution to the city's tree canopy. We also looked at census block groups that specifically had less than 35% canopy cover because they warranted additional attention and had the most opportunity for tree planting efforts. So this model is fairly similar to what was done for the tree canopy evaluation in the citywide analysis discussed earlier. It uses LiDAR data to find trees and provide certain metrics, except this one is a little bit different in that it will identify individual trees within a canopy. So you can get tree population data, tree population estimates within a particular study area, and tree height estimates for each of those trees. So on the right here, we just have a graphic depiction of what that looks like in a GIS system where it's a little hard to see here, but each little black dot is the center point of a tree. And there's a heat map where the yellow is the highest trees, graduated down to the greens and then the blues, which would be the shortest trees in this particular study area.
You want me to go back up?
I was just going to say one note in caveat or limitation about this type of analysis is that this is evaluating canopy trees, so it will not pick up with LiDAR data trees that are in the understory. So it would underestimate your total tree population, but still can provide comparative metrics that are useful for management. And this is just an example of some of that attribute data for one of the specific study area sites, the Fort Steilacoom Disc Golf parcels. It was the same one that was shown in the picture before with a histogram of tree height frequencies. And as we could see for this particular site, we have the highest proportion of trees in the 40 to 50 foot height range. That's fairly, small to medium range for a Pacific Northwest tree. Fairly level distribution as we get through those medium to taller trees, and then it tapers out. Won't dwell on this too much, but one particular area that it could be useful is in evaluating the number of regeneration trees or small trees that you would want at a forest or site to supplement the population and become the tree canopy of the future. So in this one, there's fewer smaller trees than larger ones, so it could highlight an opportunity for some additional planting, with the caveat that they might be a little bit underrepresented in this model.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So to wrap up our presentation tonight, I wanted to just share some information on the final component of the urban forest assessment project, which included a consultation with city staff on asset management tools and strategies to support public tree maintenance and management. This process included a questionnaire that we provided to city staff that was followed by a staff work session back in October. And the questionnaire and the technical memorandum detailing the outcome of this process is included in Appendix G of the final report. And the discussion topics included public tree management, current staffing levels, funding and budget, as well as current asset management approaches used by the city. And so why track public trees as an asset? So within the urban forest, public trees function as green infrastructure assets that provide a wide range of community benefits. Yet, unlike most infrastructure assets, such as fire hydrants or a stormwater basin, the value of trees appreciates over time. And so this is further justification to measure and proactively manage and track public trees to ensure that they have optimal conditions and longevity, and also to minimize risk to property and to people. There's a lot of data that shows that the cost of deferred maintenance to both trees and infrastructure, such as sidewalks, is costly. And asset management provides critical data for departments that are tasked with the on-the-ground tree maintenance, budget development, and program management of urban forests. And so I won't go into a lot of detail about all of the outcome from that session, but some of the information that was provided in there includes, some different approaches and options for tracking public trees to help with management. Some jurisdictions actually integrate their tree data right into their maintenance management system. Some cities use programs like Hanson or CityWorks or PubWorks. And this allows them to track the maintenance status and needs and even develop work orders, for their field staff, through this system. And then there are also standalone tree management software options that are available to the city that have a lot of different functions that we outline in our memo that also include options for distributing workloads, for setting inspection intervals, as well as presenting your urban forest data publicly and having some more public engagement as part of that process. So there are a lot of resources available to the city to help you manage your urban forests. And so I know that is something that the city staff will be taking up as they move forward with their urban forest program development. And so that concludes our presentation, and we would be happy to take your other questions.
Any questions from the commission?
Thank you for your presentation. The first question I have is, did you calculate what I would refer to as the churn of the trees that die and get replanted every year?
Do you mind repeating that question one more time?
I think it was saying the trees that naturally repopulate on their own. Is that factored into your calculations at all? Is that right, Lynn?
Not exactly. The trees that get removed for one purpose or another, and then their equivalent either replanted or not. Do you calculate what the loss is, if there is any, or net gain after trees are removed or die?
Yeah, that was not included in our assessment. What we mainly did was document the current condition of trees, and that and whether or not there were some that had been removed or that had died. And so the city can then take that information, specifically for the public tree inventory, can take that information and use it to help inform their future planting practices.
Thank you. Just for background too, the urban forestry program and the a lot of that protections, a lot of those protections are all new. So they were just passed, was it last year or the year before? It was just recent. And so this is our first assessment. And so this is like the ground, we're setting the foundation, so to speak, and we can kind of build on top of this. So in my mind, as we move forward, we can figure out how to make this more robust, the information better, how to utilize the tools. I think I would lean heavily on the people who are actually tracking and managing and enforcing the code and policy on that and to help make recommendations. But this has been very informative. Is there any other questions from the commission? Mr. Hur?
I just want to say thank you. I know that was a monumental lift, trying to catalog all the trees throughout Lakewood. It is a priority for the city and the members of this community. And I think this effort highlights that. It gives us a good starting point to move forward from and understand. The first step in understanding is seeing what's really in front of us and not what we think is there, but what is really there. And I think I thank you and your team for putting this presentation together, and look forward to what comes of this in the future.
Yeah. I have no further questions. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
See if I can follow myself here. First of all, if I understand it correctly, right now we have a 24.4% citywide urban tree canopy. That's what covers our city, 24%. Our goal is 40%. It's coincidental that we had the briefing on RTA and MTFE earlier, because I see here by your urban tree canopy percentage by land use that the largest use is right in the area that we talked about earlier. So by I run into a little bit of a dilemma here. I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, if we go forward with what we talked about earlier in approving the MTFE for this area, we're decreasing our urban canopy. Is that correct?
I would not ask our consultants to answer that question,
Yeah.
Mr. Estrada. I don't think it's fair for them. That was beyond their scope. Certainly a good question to ask and maybe talk about with other city staff or other members of the commission, but these guys from Facet, not so.
Yeah. And I would just add on to what Tiffany's saying is that, yeah, we were tasked with providing the baseline, as someone mentioned earlier. And the next step of this process is to take this data, look at your development code and your policies through your urban forest management planning process to then take this to the next level to start answering some of those other questions. It's like now the hard work begins. And I want to acknowledge that. I just want to acknowledge that that the next level of policy making and decision making as to how the city wants to approach meeting these goals and setting these goals is going to be really important.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Hey, Kim and Sam, thank you very much for your time tonight. And we appreciate you staying late. And I think, I don't know if Ben is still here or if he fell asleep, but
Actually, Mr. Chair, it's up to you if you would like to have middle housing conversation tonight or at our next meeting. We can do it either way.
let me defer to the commission here. Would you guys want to kick this one down the road? It's pretty late.
Yeah.
You guys okay with kicking, or you want to just fight through it?
I'm okay with consensus.
Yeah. All right, we'll go ahead and table it. I'm with the other Phil. I'm fine with the consensus. So sounds like the majority is let's wait.
Okay, well, thank you very much, representatives from Facet and representatives from Burke. Then we'll see you on March 5th.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having us. Good luck with all your work.
We'll need it. Next up on our agenda then would be reports from city council. Our liaison, council member Boki.
Thank you very much.
I noticed no comment during the public hearing.
No. We'll get to comment on it plenty. Paul Boki, your council liaison. Thank you very much for this time tonight. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. First is hopefully, or maybe you've all heard that our city manager, John Caulfield, is retiring in June. I believe that date is right around June 6th. So we're beginning the process of a search. The first step is to hire a search firm. So we have begun that process. And then once we've decided on a search firm, we'll work with that firm. The council's going to have to sit down and have some pretty frank discussions with ourselves, kind of what we're looking for, and we'll see what's out there. A lot of cities are out there right now looking for city managers at any given time. We were told that there's at least 20 cities in the state of Washington that are looking for a city manager right now. So we'll see where that goes. So thank you for your work tonight. We do have the hearing examiner decision that came out. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at that. It is in its appeal period, so we won't speak to that. It did get mentioned tonight. The city council really does appreciate your work. A lot of good comments tonight. The GMA, state law, our population goals, I wouldn't say goals, they're not really goals that we set. Goals make it sound like we set the goal. So there's a better word, the population that we have to show that we can take are not things that we have jurisdiction over. And so, but I do want to make it clear that the council, in whatever form, and we do have disagreements, I think, internally within the council over specifics on any number of things. And I think I've mentioned it to folks a time or two, things that I believe that have not been the will of the council today. Other council members would probably say the same thing. So this doesn't make your job any easier, right? If you're looking for an answer, I don't have it. I think you heard a lot of good testimony. I would say this, and as we hear public comment or we hear criticisms of various things, the council is absolutely committed to a vibrant downtown. Now, how that looks, how that will occur, we don't decide every business that moves in. We don't even decide what apartments will be built or what other kind of housing will be built. And there has been a lot of investment in the downtown core. So I think back when I moved here in 1998, we're standing, you're sitting, I'm standing where there was an empty Ernst store. Empty. The mall was basically almost closed, right? This was not a vibrant downtown core. So there's been a lot of private investment. There's been a lot of public investment. We've put money into the Colonial Plaza. We've now purchased a property adjacent to the Colonial Plaza to hopefully build a downtown park. So we feel like a vibrant downtown is essential to Lakewood. Now, how you get there is something we have to work out with the public. Public council has to work with you guys to try to get there. What does that look like? And that's an ever-moving target, right? So some folks think it should all be businesses. Other folks will say you have to have a big residential element. You know, when we put the downtown plan together, one of my concerns was that it would all be apartments eventually, right? That was one of my concerns. I don't know if that's a valid concern or not. I'm not a land use guy. But I do appreciate the work that you're putting in on this because it is really important and there's a lot going on. And private investment, along with some public investment, is a good thing for this area because it certainly is much improved from what it was at cityhood. So I just wanted to get those words in. I think I'm done and I'm available for questions, but not on land use, so.
Questions? I have none. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Councilmember Boki. Always nice to have you here. All right. Anything else that you'd like to hit on?
Very briefly, Mr. Chair, just a reminder now that the public hearing for the MFTE program changes and RTA map expansion will be open for written public comment through March 5th at noon, and you'll be provided all of that information before the meeting begins. And then it is up to you on the 5th if you want to decide you need another study session or if you're ready to think about taking action either on the 5th or March 19th. That's all up to you. The other thing I would just say is that starting next meeting, we will also begin talking about the rest of the 2025 comp plan amendments. There's now a total, I think, of 12. And so some of them will be talked about next time, and then it'll be split into the meeting following as well. That's it.
Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned. Oh,
Question as to where we take this tree report that was done tonight and any action that we might be taking to accept.
as I understood, there's no action. It was just a report. It's for the city to utilize in their forestry management. And so.
Yeah,
Ms.
if
Spear.
I could, there's just a little bit more detail to flesh out. On what it would have been February 10th, the city council agreed to, instead of re-upping, updating the 2022 action plan that came from the 2021 comprehensive plan, energy and climate change element, to create what's now, at this point at least, being called the Natural Environment and Climate Change Program. And that program is going to be more broadly based than what that energy and climate change chapter in its plan originally covered. It will include the information out of this report. That will be a basis for some of the work, but it will also encompass greenhouse gas emission reduction, energy efficiency, other climate change and resiliency actions that the city might be considering. And it will be more than a 3-year work plan renewal. It will be a true program that's interdepartmental. And so that will all be coming to you as we start to put the pieces together now that the city council gave the go ahead. So again, tonight, that was priming the pump, if you will, for what you're going to be talking about with the establishment of this program and an implementation plan that'll be a 10+ year type of program later this year.
The reason I asked is that I have some, as I think I was indicated by what I said earlier, some major misgivings with the necessity, A, B, the basis for the data being valuable and based on valuable premises. And I just would like to know whether this body is going to discuss that further, or whether I'm on my own to talk to the council, or what the action plan can be.
Good. That's a good question. I'd be curious to hear what the plan is, since it was passed, and what, how the city plans to address it, when, and what, maybe a short report on that would be helpful, or material in advance via email.
Certainly. And if Mr. Larson or Commissioner Larson, what you're asking is, you are not sure if you accept all of the data as valuable quality data that was presented this evening.
That's correct.
All I will say is that Facet Northwest was formerly DCG Watershed. It's a well-respected environmental consultant group that has done many reports, not only for jurisdictions, but for private businesses or consultants as well. If there's something where the Planning Commission feels they need to send a message to council to get a second opinion, or dig a little deeper into the sources of data as needed, you can do that. But I would just say that the city, when we took the action to hire them, had gone through an RFP process, and they were found to be the most preferred group out of the consultants that applied.
And, yeah, and it could be that we just,
Understood. They're
yeah,
prefer-
use
they're
that
pre-
and shore it up, or maybe we ask questions and so
Sure.
on to help, make sure that it's usable at the end of the day. Information's only helpful if you can.
And to me, the basis for the valid data that I asked for is easier than they felt it was formidable. And so if it were to me, I would recommend that we reject their report, that we come back based on valid data. But I don't want to go there if everybody else, A, doesn't feel that way, or B, if it's really the wrong thing to do.
I don't know that the report was up for approval by us. I think it was a city report like the rest of them, but Ms. Spears is,
It's up to the planning commission if you want to send that message to council that you don't agree with this report.
I don't know that I've had enough time to even look at it to
No, we're
make
not going to do it
That would
tonight,
be an
for sure.
unusual thing.
I just wanted to know if we were going to be presented with that opportunity.
At this point, no. At this point, this was providing the data to you. And again, that'll be the starting point for some additional information and decisions that you would be making later this year.
Was that slide deck sent off to everybody?
The slide deck was not, the actual report was. It was
Okay.
provided in the
I'm sorry,
packet
I
for this
haven't, I
evening.
haven't seen my emails
Yeah.
today yet.
And I'm happy to send the slide deck as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. If there's nothing else, let's go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thank you.